Hi, my name is Tom Kimball, and for the third chapter of the Environmental Policy Review, Key Issues in Ethiopia 2011, I studied livestock production systems and their environmental implications in Ethiopia. My initial research question for this topic was how do expanding livestock production systems and increasing numbers of cattle impact the quantity and quality of rangeland and forest cover in Ethiopia? To help answer this question, I set out with three main objectives. First, to understand the importance of livestock production systems, to then assess the trends and extent of degradation resulting from the expanding systems, and last, to evaluate and provide policy recommendations for the future of livestock production. I chose to study livestock production at the national level in Ethiopia. A literature review provided qualitative data in addition to help frame the issue. Interviews were conducted via email and international phone calls with relevant institutions and stakeholders. I created a GIS map to help provide spatial context as well as spatial data. For quantitative data, I performed a meta-analysis of the available literature, as well as conducted a bivariate analysis and a linear regression using data taken from the Food and Agricultural Organization. Historically, Ethiopians have relied on livestock in order to survive. Livestock are the oldest form of assets within Ethiopia. Today, livestock still contribute to an estimated 60 to 70% of the population's livelihoods. Currently in Ethiopia, there is rapid population growth, which has led to dramatic increases in livestock. As a result, the environments that support these production systems are becoming increasingly degraded. The environments I chose to study in my report were the Ethiopian rangelands, highlands, and forest. Ethiopian rangelands are an important resource base for livestock production and cover 62% of the national land area. Drought, aridity, and ecological degradation within the Ethiopian rangelands are increasing. Ethiopian highlands, classified as over 1,500 meters above sea level, support mixed crop and cereal production within Ethiopia. Forested areas, which border both rangeland and highlands, have been reduced from 40% to 3% of the total land area in Ethiopia. In order to present my findings, I wanted to illustrate how the livestock in Ethiopia are growing at a dramatic pace, to then discuss livestock's importance to Ethiopians in terms of functions and contribution to GDP. Then I wanted to discuss the environmental impacts that I found that livestock have in Ethiopia in both present and long term, and last, to provide my conclusions and policy recommendations. In comparing livestock totals, this figure was made using data from the FAO website from years 2000 to 2009. The four main types of livestock in Ethiopia are cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens. It is important to note the relatively high numbers of cattle, as cattle are by far the most important form of livestock in terms of functionality, contribution to GDP, and environmental impact. Using similar FAO data, this figure represents the trends in livestock production, again, from years 2000 to 2009. Cattle remain the most consistent in terms of growth. A linear regression performed on the total number of livestock represents that on average, nearly 6 million animals are found in Ethiopia every year. This table illustrates the many ways in which Ethiopians are still dependent on livestock. By dependent, I mean that there are no viable alternatives for the services that livestock provide. In pastoral areas, livestock are crucial in providing food for subsistence. In the highlands, livestock are the only form of crop cultivation. And in all of rural Ethiopia, livestock are incredibly important for transport, cash, asset accumulation, as well as security. This data was compiled from a working paper on livestock's contribution to Ethiopian GDP. Under agricultural GDP, the first highlighted cell shows the Ethiopian government estimate of livestock contribution, which is 32 billion. And then the re-estimate of this working paper shows 47 billion. When added to the 65 billion in services unaccounted for in GDP, livestock's total comes up to just over 113 billion in Ethiopian birr, which is 45% of the country's total. This data, also taken from the Livestock Policy Institute's working papers, shows a survey taken in rural Ethiopia of just under 1,500 households. Of all the assets within the household, livestock are shown to be by far the greatest value. In addition, livestock are the second most prevalent, coming just under farm tools and implements at 70 and 78% of all sampled households. So the data makes it quite clear that Livestock production in Ethiopia is growing at a dramatic pace, and that Ethiopians still remain highly dependent on that growth. My next portion of the project discusses the environmental impacts. I created this GIS map, which shows land use over elevation. The orange and red are classified as managed areas of croplands and mosaic vegetation, which represent agricultural production powered by livestock. As you can see, these areas are encroaching upon the savannas and forests of Ethiopia, represented in the light and dark green. To help support this idea, I took land use data from the FAO website from the years 2000 to 2009. Land devoted to agricultural areas, represented by the blue line, have significantly increased over the last decade, while forest cover has steadily declined. Across the decade, forest cover averages, Ethiopia loses an average of 141 hectares of forest area. In order to help evaluate the various environmental impacts of livestock, I've made a systems diagram. The basic system is Ethiopians' growing population and highly dependent population have caused a dramatic increase in livestock production of cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens, which have the following environmental impacts. The main environmental impacts presented by the literature of erosion, soil degradation, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and water pollution. These environmental impacts can often carry feedback loops, compounding one another's effects. This is an example of such a feedback loop. Very simply, livestock pressures due to increasing population cause deforestation. The forest in Ethiopia, which acts as a sort of sponge, holding in rainfall and anchoring soil nutrients, then create erosion as that sponge is taken away. Again, as the water sweeps away the topsoil, the soil is further degraded, losing valuable minerals, and as a result, agricultural productivity goes down, causing the need for more land clearing to support that growing population, and which again creates more deforestation. I gathered data presented in this table using the Implications of Livestock series, which describes greenhouse gas production of the livestock in developing countries. Climate change poses a serious threat to Ethiopia in particular, as it is already a drought-prone country. The two main greenhouse gases presented are methane and nitrogen. Methane, which is 20 times as effective as trapping in heat as carbon dioxide, is by far the most produced by cattle. In discussing development priorities, I used an interview taken from Dirk Hoekstra, a representative of the International Livestock Research Institution. Who described Ethiopia's government's biggest goal is to increase productivity by overcoming the major problems of genetic problems, feed availability and the quality of that feed, as well as veterinary and marketing services. So in conclusion, livestock account to an enormous amount, 45% of agricultural GDP. Agricultural expansion is the government's top priority in order to feed a growing population. Negative environmental impacts as a result of livestock are a serious threat to Ethiopia. My policy recommendations would be to increase productivity within the livestock sector with better efficiency through genetics, feed, and services. Future policy surrounding Ethiopian livestock needs to take into account the value of livestock to rural Ethiopians, the already fragile and degraded rangeland and highland ecosystems, as well as the local knowledge that Ethiopians can provide, which often indicate the most crucial indicators of environmental degradation. And lastly, any policy would require the cooperation of all stakeholders, from the federal government to the local Ethiopian stakeholder. Here are my sources. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at tkimball@colby.edu.